That voice should be on your side.
Negotiate without fear. Be the one who sets the tone. In negotiations, the winner isn't the one who talks the most, and it's not the one who's smartest. The winner is the one who sets the tone. Every time you worry before a conversation, someone else is already ready to take your place. They'll be calmer, louder, more confident. But here's the truth: they're not stronger than you. They just don't fear starting. This book is about entering negotiations without asking for permission. It's about setting the rules of the game. Because the moment you stop asking and start leading, that's the moment everything changes. Introduction: Why you fear negotiations. The fear isn't in the people. The fear is in the position. Let's start with something uncomfortable. You're not afraid of negotiations because they're difficult. You're afraid because you enter them feeling like you have something to lose. Every negotiation you've avoided, every time you accepted less than you wanted, every moment you stayed quiet when you should have spoken. It wasn't because the other person was stronger. It was because you believed they held the power. But here's what changes everything: power in negotiations isn't something you have or don't have. It's something you project, and projection starts with one thing: your position. Not your job title, not your experience, not your credentials. Your internal position, the place you stand inside yourself when you walk into the room. Are you walking in asking, or are you walking in offering? Are you hoping they'll say yes, or are you calmly waiting for them to decide? Are you defending your worth, or are you simply stating it? That difference, that's everything. This book will show you how to enter negotiations from a position of calm strength. Not aggression, not arrogance, not manipulation. Just clarity, just presence, just the quiet understanding that you belong in this conversation. And when you enter from that place, you set the tone. And the person who sets the tone controls the outcome. Chapter 1: Negotiations are not conflict. The person who fears negotiation has already agreed to less. Think about the last time you didn't negotiate. The job offer you accepted without countering. The rate you agreed to without questioning. The terms you signed without pushing back. Why didn't you negotiate? Not because the terms were fair, but because you were afraid. Afraid of seeming difficult, afraid of losing the opportunity, afraid of being told no. So you said yes to less than you wanted, and the moment you did, you taught them you don't value yourself enough to ask. Here's the truth nobody tells you: the person who fears negotiation has already lost. Not because they're weak, but because they've decided the outcome before the conversation even starts. They've decided, I can't ask for more. They've decided I should be grateful for what's offered. They've decided I don't deserve better. And decisions made in fear always cost you. In this chapter, you'll learn why the word negotiation scares you. You'll understand the mistake of expecting pressure. And you'll discover how to reframe negotiation as a normal conversation between adults. Because here's what changes everything: negotiation isn't about taking, it's about discussing. It's about two people finding terms that work. And when you enter with that mindset, the fear disappears. You're not fighting, you're not demanding, you're just talking. And talking, you can do that. 1. Why the word negotiation scares you. Let's be honest about the word itself: negotiation. It feels heavy, doesn't it? Formal. Confrontational, like something that requires strategy and armor. But that's not what negotiation is. That's just what you've been taught to believe. Here's the truth: a negotiation is just a conversation between adults about what works for both of them. That's it. Not a battle, not a test, not a performance. Just two people finding terms that make sense. But you've been conditioned to see it as conflict. And conflict triggers fear, so you avoid it. 2. The mistake of expecting pressure. You walk into a negotiation expecting pushback, resistance, judgment, rejection. And because you expect it, you prepare defensively, you rehearse justifications, you plan explanations, you brace for impact. But here's what happens: your defensiveness creates the pressure you were trying to avoid. Because when you enter a conversation expecting a fight, You sound like you're fighting, and people respond accordingly. 1. 3. Negotiation as a normal conversation. What if you stopped calling it negotiation? What if you just called it talking about terms? Suddenly it's not so scary. You're not demanding, you're not confronting, you're just discussing. Here's what I'm thinking, here's what works for me. Let's see if we can find something that works for both of us. That's not conflict, that's collaboration. 1. 4. The shift in perspective. The moment you stop seeing negotiation as confrontation, everything changes. You stop entering defensively, you stop over-explaining, you stop apologizing for having preferences. Instead, you enter calmly. With clarity, with the simple understanding I'm here to have a conversation about what makes sense. That's not aggressive, that's adult. 1. 5. Why this matters. When you reframe negotiation as conversation, you remove the fear, and when you remove the fear, you show up differently. You're not tense, you're not rushed, you're not apologetic, you're just present, and presence is power. Chapter 2. Whoever sets the tone controls the room. The first calm voice is already in control. You've seen it happen. 2 people walk into a negotiation. One is tense, speaking quickly, over-explaining. The other is calm, speaking slowly, stating clearly. Who do you trust more? Who feels more in control? It's not the one with better arguments, it's the one with better tone. Because tone is power. Not the power of dominance, the power of certainty. When you speak calmly, people listen differently. When you speak steadily, people take you seriously. When you speak without apology, people respect your position. In this chapter, you'll learn what tone actually means, why tone matters more than arguments, and how to subtly take initiative without being aggressive. Because here's the secret: you don't need to dominate the conversation. You just need to be steadier than the other person. The reactive person speaks quickly, over-explains, fills every silence. The steady person speaks slowly, states clearly, lets silence sit. And silence is your ally, because the person who can sit with silence is the person who isn't afraid. The first sentence you speak sets the tone for everything that follows. So don't start with "sorry to bother you." Don't start with "I was hoping maybe." Start with "I'd like to discuss this." Clear, calm, direct, and watch how the room adjusts to you. 2. 1. What tone actually means. Tone isn't what you say, it's how you say it. It's the energy you bring, the pace you set, the certainty you project. And in any negotiation, the person who sets the tone first controls the entire conversation. 2. Why tone matters more than arguments. You can have the best argument in the world, the strongest case, the most logical reasoning. But if your tone is uncertain, rushed, or apologetic, no one will take you seriously. Because people don't respond to your words, they respond to your energy. If you sound unsure, they feel unsure. If you sound defensive, they push harder. If you sound calm, they calm down. Tone is contagious. 2. 3. How to subtly take initiative. You don't need to dominate the conversation. You don't need to talk over anyone. You don't need to be louder. You just need to be steadier. Start with a calm statement. Set a clear frame. Speak at a measured pace. Let's talk about what makes sense here. Here's what I'm thinking. I'd like to discuss the terms. Not rushed, not apologetic, just clear. That's how you take initiative. 2. For the person who stays calm wins. In any negotiation, there are 2 positions: the person who is reactive and the person who is steady. The reactive person speaks quickly, over-explains, defends before being attacked, fills every silence. The steady person speaks slowly, states clearly, waits for responses, lets silence sit. Guess who wins? 2. 5. Setting the tone from the first sentence. The first sentence you speak sets the tone for everything that follows. If you start with "sorry to bother you," but you set a tone of apology. If you start with "I was hoping maybe we could," you set a tone of uncertainty. But if you start with "I'd like to discuss the terms," you set a tone of clarity. The room adjusts to you. Chapter 3. Fear of losing the main sabotage. You don't give in because you're weak. You give in because you're afraid to lose. Think about the last time you accepted less than you wanted. Not because it was fair, but because you were afraid. Afraid they'd say no. Afraid they'd walk away. Afraid you'd lose the opportunity entirely. So you took what was offered, and you told yourself, at least I got something. But here's what really happened: you negotiated against yourself. Before they even pushed back, you'd already decided, I can't ask for more. That's not weakness, that's fear. Fear of hearing no, fear of seeming difficult, fear of being rejected. And fear makes you negotiate from need instead of choice. In this chapter, you'll learn how to exit the position of need, how to shift from I hope they say yes to let's see if this works for both of us. Because here's the truth: the person who needs the deal less has all the power. Not because they don't care, but because they're willing to walk away. And the moment you become willing to walk away, that's the moment you stop giving in. You stop over-explaining. You stop apologizing. You stop accepting less. Because you finally understand being liked is not the same as being respected. And in negotiations, respect is what gets you results. 3. 1. The fear of hearing no. This is the fear that stops most people. What if they say no? What if they reject my request? What if they pull the offer? What if they walk away? So you don't ask. You accept what's offered. You agree to less because less feels safer than nothing. 3. 2. The fear of seeming difficult. There's another fear, quieter but just as strong. What if they think I'm difficult? What if I come across as demanding? What if they don't want to work with me? What if I ruin the relationship? So you stay agreeable. You don't push back. You say yes when you mean maybe, because being liked feels more important than being respected. 3. How to exit the position of need. Here's the pattern: when you negotiate from need, you lose before you start. Because need makes you accept less, explain more, apologize unnecessarily, back down quickly. But when you negotiate from choice, everything changes. You're not begging. You're not hoping. You're just discussing. This is what works for me. Not is this okay? I'm looking for X. Not would it be possible to maybe get X? Choice sounds different than need, and people respond to that difference. 3. 4. The mindset shift. From I hope they say yes, to let's see if this works for both of us. From I need this, to this could be good. From please don't reject me, to either this works or it doesn't. It's not arrogance, it's detachment. And detachment is the most powerful negotiating position there is. 3. 5. Why this feels scary. Because you've been taught that caring less means losing, but the opposite is true. The person who cares less about being liked wins. The person who's willing to walk away wins. The person who doesn't need approval wins. Not because they don't care about the outcome, but because they care more about their position. Chapter 4. The inner state of a strong negotiator. Calm isn't the absence of emotion, it's control. You think strong negotiators don't feel nervous. You think they walk in fearless, completely at ease. Wrong. They feel the same things you do. The same nerves, the same uncertainty, the same flutter in the chest. The difference: they don't let it control them, because calm isn't the absence of emotion. Calm is the management of emotion. In this chapter, you'll learn how to enter a conversation collected, how to focus internally instead of externally, why confidence is felt immediately, before you even speak. Because here's what most people miss: your state matters more than your words. If you walk in nervous, rushed, defensive, people feel it, and they respond to that, not to your arguments. But if you walk in calm, grounded, clear, everything shifts. Strong negotiators don't focus on the other person, they focus on themselves. What do I want here? What's my position? What am I willing to accept? Not what do they want? How can I please them? When you focus internally, you stay steady. When you focus externally, you become reactive. And here's the secret: before any important conversation, take 2 minutes. Breathe deeply, ground yourself, clarify your position. That's it. 2 minutes. And when you enter from that place, you don't need to prove anything. You don't need to seek approval. You're just present. And presence is the most powerful thing you can bring into any room. 4. 1. How to enter a conversation collected. Before you say a single word, your state matters. If you walk in nervous, rushed, defensive, uncertain, people feel it, and they respond to that, not your words. But if you walk in calm, grounded, clear, present, everything shifts. 4. 2. Internal focus. Strong negotiators don't focus on the other person. They focus on themselves, not in an arrogant way, in a centered way. They ask, what do I want here? What's my position? What am I willing to accept? Not, what do they want? What will they think? How can I please them? When you focus internally, you stay steady. When you focus externally, you become reactive. 4. 3. Why confidence is felt immediately. You can't fake confidence. People feel it in your pace, your pauses, your tone, your eye contact. If you're confident, you speak slowly. You don't rush to fill silence. You make your point and stop. If you're uncertain, you speak quickly. You over-explain. You justify before being challenged. Confidence isn't loud, it's clear. 4. The pre-negotiation ritual. Before any important conversation, breathe slow, deep breaths. This signals your nervous system we're safe. Ground yourself. Feel your feet on the floor. This brings you into your body, out of your head. Clarify your position. Know what you want. Know what you'll accept. Know what you'll walk away from. This takes 2 minutes, and it changes everything. 4. 5. Entering with presence. When you enter collected, people treat you differently, not because you said anything impressive, but because your energy commands respect. You're not trying to prove anything. You're not seeking approval. You're just there. Fully, calmly, clearly, and that presence, that's power. Chapter 5. Speak less, influence more. Extra words are concessions. You make your point, and then you keep talking. I'm thinking $5 for this project, but I mean, if that's too high, we can discuss it. I'm flexible. I just thought that seemed fair based on the scope, but I'm open to stop. Every word after your first clear statement is a concession. Every explanation is a signal I don't believe what I just said. Every qualification is an invitation. Please push back. In this chapter, you'll learn the power of pauses, how not to over-explain, why silence strengthens your position instead of weakening it. Because here's what most people don't understand: silence is not awkward. Silence is power. When you make a statement and stop, you force the other person to respond. You put the ball in their court. You show that you're comfortable with what you said. But when you keep talking, you're essentially negotiating against yourself. You're weakening your own position before they even respond. The person who speaks less in a negotiation appears more confident, forces others to fill the silence, avoids revealing too much too soon, maintains control. The person who speaks more appears uncertain, talks themselves out of leverage, gives away their position, loses respect. So here's the rule: say what you mean clearly, then stop. Don't add "does that make sense?" Don't add "if that works for you." Don't add anything, just stop. And let your words carry their own weight. 5. 1. The power of pauses. Most people fear silence, so they fill it. They keep talking, keep explaining, keep justifying, thinking if I just say enough, they'll understand. But here's what actually happens: the more you talk, the weaker your position becomes, because every extra word is a signal I'm not confident in what I just said. 5. 2. How not to over-explain. You state your position, then you stop. You don't add "because, I mean, does that make sense?" If that's okay, you just stop and let your statement stand. Example: week, I was thinking maybe $5 would be fair, if that works for you. But I'm flexible, we can discuss it. Strong, I'm looking at $5 for this project. See the difference? 5. 3. Why silence strengthens your position. When you make a statement and then stay silent, you force the other person to respond. You put the ball in their court. You show that you're comfortable with your position. Silence is, I've said what I needed to say, now it's your turn. And that confidence, it makes people take you more seriously. 5. For the trap of verbal anxiety. Verbal anxiety sounds like, so yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is, it's not about the words, it's about the pattern. Hedging, qualifying, softening. Every time you do this, you dilute your message. Instead, say what you mean, clearly, and stop. 5. Less is always more. In negotiations, brevity is power. The person who speaks less appears more confident, forces others to fill the silence, avoids giving away too much, maintains mystery and control. The person who speaks more appears uncertain, reveals their position too early, talks themselves out of leverage, loses the room's attention. Choose brevity. Chapter 6. How to respond to pressure. Pressure only works on people who start defending themselves. Someone says that's too expensive, and immediately you feel it. The urge to justify, the need to explain, the impulse to prove your worth. Well, actually, if you consider the scope and the timeline and the market rate, in my experience, stop. The moment you defend, you've already lost, because defense is a position of weakness. When you defend, you're saying you're right to question me. Let me prove I'm worth it. But here's what strong negotiators know: pressure only works if you react to it. In this chapter, you'll learn how to respond to pressure without defending yourself, how to stay calm when others get loud, how to redirect instead of react. Because when someone says that's too high, you don't need to explain why it's not. You just need to say, what were you thinking? No defense, no justification, just a calm question that puts the conversation back on them. Or, I hear you. What number makes sense to you? You're not arguing. You're not scrambling. You're just redirecting. And here's the key: when they get louder, you get quieter. When they speed up, you slow down. When they push, you stay steady. Because the person who stays calm has all the power. People expect defense. They expect justification. They expect you to scramble. When you don't, when you stay calm and centered, it disrupts their entire approach. They can't fight with someone who isn't fighting back. They can't pressure someone who isn't resisting. Your calm neutralizes their intensity, and that's how you win. 6. Calm responses instead of defense. When someone pushes back, that's too high. We can't do that. That's unreasonable. Your instinct is to defend. Well, actually, if you look at the scope, I can explain why. Let me justify this. Don't, because the moment you defend, you've lost. 6. The alternative to defense. Instead of defending, acknowledge and redirect their pressure. That's too high. Your response: what were you thinking? No defense, no explanation. Just a calm question that puts the conversation back on them. Or your response: I hear you. What number makes sense to you? Still calm, still in control, still not defending. 6. How not to raise your voice. When someone applies pressure, they often get louder, more forceful, more intense. Your instinct might be to match them, to get louder too. Don't. Because the person who stays calm has the power. When they raise their voice, you lower yours. When they speed up, you slow down. When they push, you remain steady. This does two things. It keeps you in control of yourself. It makes them feel out of control. 6. Returning the conversation to center. Pressure tries to pull you off balance, to make you reactive, to make you scramble. Your job is to return the conversation to center. Then, this is ridiculous. We've never paid this much before. I understand. Let's look at what makes sense for this specific project. You're not arguing, you're not defending, you're just redirecting. Calmly bringing the conversation back to the actual discussion. 6. Why this works. Because people expect defense. They expect you to justify. They expect you to scramble. When you don't, when you stay calm and centered, it disrupts their pattern. They can't fight with someone who isn't fighting back. They can't pressure someone who isn't resisting. Your calm neutralizes their intensity. Chapter 7: Boundaries that get respected. A clear boundary sounds quieter than an excuse. You've been taught that saying no requires justification, so you say I can't because the reason I'm unable to is I wish I could. But unfortunately, and with every word, you weaken your position. Because explanations sound like excuses, and excuses sound like you're asking permission to have boundaries. But here's the truth: no is a complete sentence. In this chapter, you'll learn how to say no without conflict, how to be firm without being harsh, why boundaries actually increase your value instead of decreasing it. Because most people think if I set boundaries, they won't want to work with me. Wrong. When you have clear boundaries, people respect you more. They know where they stand. They know you value yourself. They know you're not desperate. And in negotiations, not being desperate is everything. Here's the difference: harsh, absolutely not. That's ridiculous. Firm, that doesn't work for me. You can be clear without being cruel. You can hold your ground without being aggressive. I'm not able to do that. That's outside my scope. I don't work under those terms. No apology, no over-explanation, just clarity. And here's what happens when you do this consistently: people stop pushing your boundaries. Not because they're afraid of you, but because they know pushing won't work. You've shown them this is where I stand, and the person who knows where they stand, that's the person who sets the tone. 7. How to say no without conflict. Most people struggle with no because they think it requires explanation. No because I can't. The reason is I wish I could, but here's the truth: no is a complete sentence. You don't need to justify it. You don't need to soften it. You just need to state it. 7. The difference between firmness and harshness. Harsh, absolutely not. That's ridiculous. Firm, that doesn't work for me. See the difference? Harsh attacks. Firm simply states. You can be clear without being cruel. You can hold your boundary without being aggressive. I'm not able to do that. That's outside my scope. I don't work under those terms. Clear, calm, final. 7. Respect without compromise. You can respect someone and still hold your boundary. I hear what you're saying, and I respect your position. This is mine. You're not dismissing them. You're not attacking them. You're just not moving, and that's okay. 7. Why boundaries increase your value. When you have clear boundaries, people know where they stand with you. They know what you will and won't accept. They know you respect yourself. And when you respect yourself, others respect you too. But when you have weak boundaries, when you say yes to everything, when you bend constantly, people lose respect. Not because they're cruel, but because you've shown them you don't value your own position. 7. The boundary statement. Here's the template: I appreciate their position and your boundary. Examples. I appreciate that you're working with a budget, and I don't work below X. I appreciate the urgency, and I need at least 2 weeks for this project. I appreciate your interest, and that timeline doesn't work for me. You acknowledge them, then you state your boundary. No apology, no explanation, no wavering. Chapter 8. The moment you start setting the tone. You feel it instantly. The conversation stops pressing on you. You're in a negotiation, and something is different. You're not scrambling for words. You're not defending yourself. You're not feeling that familiar knot of anxiety in your chest. You're just there. Present, calm, clear, and the other person, they're responding to you. Not because you dominated the conversation, not because you were louder or more aggressive, but because you stopped yielding. In this chapter, you'll understand the internal shift that changes everything. The new dynamic of communication, the moment when negotiations stop being scary. Because here's what you finally realize: negotiations were never actually scary. Your position was scary. The position of needing their approval, the position of fearing their rejection, the position of defending your worth. But when you shift to stating your terms, accepting their choice, and knowing your value, the fear evaporates, not because negotiations got easier, but because you got steadier. And here's the beautiful part: the first time you hold your ground, it feels hard. The 10th time, it feels natural. Because every time you state your boundary without apologizing, every time you stay silent after making your point, every time you respond to pressure without defending, you build evidence. Evidence that you can do this. Evidence that it works. Evidence that you belong in these conversations. And one day you notice people don't push you as hard anymore. They don't question you as much. They don't test your boundaries. Not because you became intimidating, but because you set the tone, and they can feel it. 8. 1. The internal shift. It doesn't announce itself. You won't wake up one day and think, today I'm a strong negotiator. But one day you'll be in a conversation, and you'll notice you're not nervous, you're not scrambling, you're not defending, you're just present. And the other person is responding to you. 8. 2. The new dynamic of communication. Before this shift, you react to them. You adjust to their energy. You follow their lead. After this shift, they adjust to you. They match your pace. They follow your tone. You didn't demand this. You didn't force it. You just stopped yielding, and everything changed. 8. 3. When negotiations stop being scary. Here's what you realize: negotiations were never actually scary. Your position was scary. The position of needing their approval, fearing their rejection, defending your worth. But when you shift to stating your terms, accepting their choice, knowing your value, the fear disappears, not because negotiations got easier, but because you got steadier. 8. 4. The confidence that comes from repetition. The first time you hold your ground, it feels hard. The second time, slightly easier. The 10th time, natural, because every time you state your boundary without apologizing, stay silent after making your point, respond to pressure without defending, you build evidence. Evidence that you can do this. Evidence that it works. Evidence that you belong in these conversations. And that evidence becomes unshakable confidence. 8. 5. You've become the person who sets the tone. One day you'll notice you walk into negotiations differently. Not with bravado. Not with aggression. Just with quiet certainty. You know what you want. You know what you're worth. You know what you'll accept. And you communicate that clearly. Without apology, without defense, without hesitation. And people feel it. They don't push as hard. They don't question as much. They don't test your boundaries. Because you've set the tone, and the person who sets the tone controls the outcome. Conclusion: you're not asking anymore. You don't enter negotiations for permission. You enter for a result. And that's exactly when you start setting the tone. This book wasn't about becoming aggressive. It wasn't about manipulation or tricks. It was about one simple shift: from asking to stating, from defending to clarifying, from needing to choosing. You've learned that negotiations are not conflict, they're just conversations. That the person who sets the tone controls the room. That fear of losing is what makes you lose. That your internal state matters more than your words. That speaking less gives you more influence. That pressure only works if you react to it. That clear boundaries increase your value. And that the moment you stop yielding, everything changes. But here's what matters most: you don't need to wait until you feel ready. You don't need more practice. You don't need more confidence. You just need to start. Start entering conversations with clarity instead of apology. Start stating your position without defending it. Start holding your boundaries without explaining them. One conversation at a time. Because the truth is, you've been negotiating from a position of fear. Fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of seeming difficult. And that fear has cost you. It's cost you money. It's cost you respect. It's cost you opportunities. But that ends now. Not because you've become fearless, but because you've realized the fear doesn't matter. What matters is the tone you set. What matters is the position you take. What matters is the clarity you bring. And when you bring that clarity, when you state your terms calmly, hold your boundaries firmly, and refuse to defend what doesn't need defending, people listen. Not because you demanded it, but because you embodied it. You're not asking anymore. You're not hoping. You're not waiting for permission. You're entering negotiations as someone who belongs there. Someone who knows their value. Someone who sets the tone. And the world responds to that. Now go, set the tone. The room is waiting for you to claim it.